He's living with dad and he's watching porn. That's my boy, right? That's Donald Robert, everybody. Okay, cool. On deck we got Jeezy Weezy, but coming up right now we got PJ the Coug.
Yeah.
PJ the Coug.
You're supposed to drew all the other names out. It should be Coug.
PJ the Coug. There you go. PJ the Coug.
Thank you. Earlier, Noah was talking about how comedy requires a lot of bravery. Usually the first comedian of the night is told they're taking the bullet. And I think in the modern era, we can just call that being the healthcare CEO. Okay, sorry. And speaking of healthcare, somebody else was talking about filling out a medical questionnaire, and I recently had to update my medical stuff with my doctor. So one of the questions they ask you is, have you ever been unconscious? And my answer is, every night. And then they're calling 911, and that didn't go over well. And then last week, somebody described the Shanghai room as a dive bar. I take exception to that because they don't have pull tabs here, and I think that's a minimum requirement for a dive bar. Recently saw Sinners. Not the movie, I just went to a really judgmental church when I was a kid. So I see Sinners all the time, actually. My second youngest daughter, one time, she was in a ball pond in a McDonald's play area. And this kid was throwing balls at her. He was about 6 years old, she was like 2.5. He's throwing balls at her, and I was, she was crying and she was getting upset. And I was like, oh no, and so I was stage whispering, like, oh, come on out, honey. Obviously somebody's parents aren't taking care of their child. And she gets to the entrance of the ball pond, and she gets this look on her face, and she has like Jack Black eyebrows. So suddenly she gets this look on her face, and she turns and she jumps at this kid, knees first, and crashes into him. And he's like, ah! And then it's like, oh, no, we don't do that. Come on out. And meanwhile, inside I'm thinking, great shot. It's like I really raised her well. I worked casino security for a long time, and I've worked in law enforcement where I've dealt with actual murderers and rapists. I've worked in hospital security where I've dealt with victims of murderers and rapists, and I've worked in casino security, and I can honestly say the worst people I ever dealt with were in casino security, or casinos. The security people weren't that bad. Anyway, there was this one time we had an incident, and two guys were causing trouble, and one of them was telling the other one to calm down, and the result was that the guy who was telling his buddy to calm down the whole time had a warrant, and so both got arrested. And that's not the funny part. The funny part was later the guy who had who had the warrant had to go to the bathroom, and I got to escort a deputy, and this guy who just happened to have a warrant out to the restroom, and this guy's got his hands tied behind his back, handcuffed, and the deputy uncuffs him, and he does his stuff, and then he turns around and he puts his hand behind his back again, and the deputy says, "Wash your hands." And the guy's like, "Fuck you, man." He says, "No, wash your hands." And then the deputy said the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He said, "Wash your hands or you're not getting back in my car." And I was like, I'd be like, I was like, so anyway, the guy washes his hands, and the deputy says, "Use soap." And the guy's like, "Fuck you, man." He's like, "No, use soap or you're not getting back in my car." And again, I'm just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So anyway, the guy washes his hand, he uses soap, and he puts his hand, and he says, "There you go, using your authority on me." And the deputy whips out his taser. And my first thought is like, oh crap, not again. But my second thought was like, I've never actually seen what one of these does. This could be really cool. But the guy calmed down, so. Anybody hear that Canadian money smells like maple syrup? Anybody heard that? That's like the Canadian dollar bills that have that plastic in the middle apparently smells like maple syrup. The Canadian bill that I had, I sniffed it and all I smelled was cocaine. But I got it off a dead bear, so I don't know how that happened exactly. Last but not least, my father, when I was a teenager one day, he complained that I was not washing the dish. I was not loading the dishwasher correctly, and I told him I've never loaded the new dishwasher. And what I learned immediately was the crime I had confessed to was far worse than if I had just said, show me how to load the dishwasher. Because apparently we had purchased the new dishwasher 6 years prior. So that I had confessed to a much more heinous crime than if I had just said, oh, no, I'm not loading the dishwasher correctly. Anyway, last but not least, I am 236 pounds of raw animal magnetism and sexual prowess, and the other 40 pounds are dad bod. Thank you very much. I'm not going to use up the last 8 seconds. It's okay.
Oh, you're okay. I thought you were going to use it up. All right, that was PJ the Coug. Okay. That was PJ the